The echoes of Ward 13. The moon hung low in the dark sky, casting eerie shadows upon the desolate landscape. Dr. Emily Harris and Jack Sullivan stood before the foreboding entrance of the abandoned hospital, Ward 13 looming before them like a forgotten nightmare. Dr. Harris, a fearless paranormal investigator with a penchant for the supernatural, had long been drawn to the stories surrounding Ward 13. Jack Sullivan, a skeptical journalist always in pursuit of the next big story, had reluctantly agreed to accompany her on this chilling adventure. As they stepped inside, the musty air clung to their skin like a shroud. Broken windows allowed slivers of moonlight to pierce the darkness, revealing rusted hospital beds and shattered glass strewn across the cold, linoleum floor. "This place gives me the creeps," Jack muttered, his voice trembling with unease. Dr. Harris flashed him a confident smile. "That's precisely why we're here, Jack, to uncover the truth about Ward 13. They began their exploration, their footsteps echoing through the decaying corridors. The hospital's eerie reputation weighed heavy on their minds. Patient records had hinted at dark experiments conducted within these walls, experiments that defied all ethical boundaries. As they delved deeper into the abandoned ward, they stumbled upon a room with old patient files strewn about. Dr. Harris knelt down and began to sift through the yellowed documents, her heart pounding with anticipation. The files contained cryptic notes and gruesome sketches, suggesting that Ward 13 had been a place of unspeakable horrors. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed through the room, sending shivers down their spines. "Help me." Jack and Dr. Harris exchanged uneasy glances. The voice had seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Jack's skepticism wavered for the first time that night. They continued to explore, guided by an unseen force. The whispers grew louder, and eerie apparitions flickered in and out of existence. One ghostly figure, a nurse from the 1950s, emerged before them. She wore a pristine white uniform stained with the passage of time, and her eyes held a mournful expression. "Nurse Mary," Dr. Harris ventured. The apparition nodded slowly, her spectral form wavering. "I was once Nurse Mary, here in Ward 13. Jack's skepticism melted away as he watched the ghostly figure before him. "What happened here? Why are you still here?" Nurse Mary's voice trembled as she recounted the horrors of the past. "This place was a nightmare, Doctor. Unethical experiments were conducted on patients, and their screams still echo through these walls. I tried to help them, but I couldn't save them all." Dr. Harris felt a surge of compassion for Nurse Mary and the patients who had suffered within these walls. "We have to uncover the truth, Nurse Mary. We can't let their suffering go unnoticed." As they continued their investigation, the hospital seemed to come alive around them. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered, and ghostly figures appeared and disappeared with increasing frequency. The very building seemed to resist their presence. In a hidden room, they discovered a hidden chamber filled with outdated medical equipment and ominous-looking machines. Patient records hinted at grotesque experiments that had left countless souls trapped in torment. And then, the truth became clear. The hospital itself had absorbed the suffering of the patients, becoming an entity of malevolence. It sought to trap the living in a never-ending nightmare, just as it had done to those who had once walked these halls. In a terrifying revelation, they realized the fate of the missing patients. Their souls were bound to this cursed place, forever tormented by the dark experiments that had stolen their lives. Dr. Harris and Jack knew they had to put an end to the hospital's reign of terror. With Nurse Mary's guidance, they performed a ritual to release the trapped souls. As the last specter faded into the light, the hospital's malevolent presence dissipated, leaving Ward 13 in an eerie silence. The echoes of Ward 13 had finally been silenced, but the horrors they had uncovered would haunt Dr. Harris and Jack Sullivan for the rest of their lives. They had witnessed the consequences of unethical experimentation and the lingering presence of the past, and they vowed to ensure that the world never forgot the tragic history of Ward 13. The Whispering Shadows. The moon hid behind a veil of thick clouds, casting the abandoned hospital in an eerie darkness. Its windows, broken and shattered, gaped like hollow eyes, and the overgrown ivy seemed to claw at the crumbling bricks. Leo and Rachel stood at the entrance, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive blackness. Leo, a daring urban explorer with an insatiable curiosity for the supernatural, was eager to venture inside the forsaken building. Rachel, his best friend, had always been sensitive to the unexplained, and she had reluctantly agreed to accompany him on this perilous journey. "Are you sure about this, Leo?" Rachel's voice quivered as she clutched her flashlight. Leo grinned, his excitement overpowering any fear that might have been lurking in the shadows. "Don't worry, Rachel. We've faced worse before." They descended into the basement, their footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. The air grew colder, and the scent of dampness engulfed them as they reached the bottom. The basement was a labyrinthine maze of dimly lit hallways, some of them so narrow that they had to squeeze through sideways. Their flashlights flickered as they moved deeper into the bowels of the hospital, revealing crumbling walls, broken pipes, and the occasional rat scurrying away from the intruders. But it wasn't just the decay that unsettled them. It was the strange whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Rachel clutched her ears, her face contorted in agony. "Leo, can't you hear it?" The whispers. Leo strained to listen, but all he heard were the usual sounds of the decaying building. "I don't hear anything, Rachel. It's just your imagination." But Rachel wasn't convinced. The whispers grew louder, and they seemed to come from all directions at once. It was as if the very darkness around them was whispering secrets that they weren't meant to know. As they ventured deeper into the basement, the shadows grew thicker, more oppressive. Rachel's sensitivity to the supernatural had always been a mystery, and it seemed to be in overdrive tonight. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were following their every move. And then, the shadows themselves began to move. Leo froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The shadows that clung to the walls seemed to detach themselves, slithering like serpents across the floor. They whispered, not in any language that Leo could understand, but in a haunting, ethereal tongue that sent chills down his spine. Rachel's eyes widened in terror. "Leo, they're alive. The shadows are alive." The shadows danced and weaved, taking on grotesque shapes and contorted forms. They seemed to mock the intruders, their whispers growing more menacing by the second. Leo and Rachel stumbled backward, their hearts pounding as the shadows closed in. Leo's rational mind struggled to make sense of the impossible. This can't be real. It's just a trick of the light. But Rachel knew better. She had seen enough in her life to know that there were forces beyond explanation. "Leo, we have to get out of here." With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they turned and ran, retracing their steps through the labyrinthine basement. The shadows pursued them, their sinister whispers echoing in their ears. Leo and Rachel's flashlights flickered, threatening to go out as they raced toward the stairs that would lead them back to safety. As they burst out of the basement and into the moonlit night, they looked back at the hospital, their breaths ragged. The shadows remained trapped below, unable to follow them into the light. Leo and Rachel collapsed on the ground, their hearts still racing, their minds struggling to comprehend the horrors they had witnessed. The fear of the unknown, the power of belief, had tested them in ways they could never have imagined. The whispering shadows of the haunted hospital had shown them that some mysteries were best left unsolved, that there were depths of darkness that should never be explored. They knew they had escaped with their lives, but the memory of those shadowy whispers would haunt their dreams for years to come, a chilling reminder of the supernatural forces that lurked in the world, just beyond the reach of human understanding. The lost patient. The haunted hospital loomed before Sarah, its towering facade a bleak testament to the passage of time. She had come to this forsaken place in search of answers, her heart heavy with the memory of her missing brother, David. For years, he had been lost to the enigmatic clutches of this decaying building. And now Sarah was determined to uncover the truth. As she stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the faint echoes of her footsteps reverberated through the empty halls. Sarah's flashlight cast eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper and cracked tiles that lined the floor. She knew that the upper floors were the most perilous, the darkest corners of the hospital where her brother had vanished without a trace. Sarah's quest led her to an unexpected encounter with Tom, an old caretaker who had lingered in the hospital long after it had been abandoned. His eyes held a deep sadness, and he seemed to carry the weight of the building's secrets on his frail shoulders. "Are you looking for someone, miss?" Tom's voice quivered as he approached Sarah. Sarah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "My brother, David. He disappeared here years ago. I need to know what happened to him." Tom's eyes seemed to flicker with understanding. "I can help you find some answers, but you must follow me." The upper floors hold the key to the hospital's secrets. Together, they climbed the crumbling staircase, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. The upper floors were a time capsule, frozen in the past. Patient rooms remained untouched, their windows covered in dust and grime. Beds lay barren, as if the patients had simply vanished into thin air. Sarah's heart ached as she explored the rooms, searching for any sign of her brother. In one room, she discovered a hidden compartment in an old nightstand. Inside, she found a diary, its pages yellowed with age. It belonged to David. As she flipped through the diary's pages, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. David's words painted a haunting picture of his time in the hospital. He spoke of mysterious voices that whispered to him in the night, of shadowy figures that moved through the corridors. His words were filled with fear and desperation. Tom, who had been watching Sarah, spoke softly. Your brother wasn't the only one who heard those voices. Many patients did, and they vanished just like him. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the diary. What happened here, Tom? Why did they all disappear? Tom's voice quivered with sorrow. This hospital was a place of experiments, of cruel and inhuman treatments. Patients were subjected to horrors beyond imagination, and when they couldn't bear it any longer, they simply vanished. As Sarah and Tom delved deeper into the hospital's secrets, Sarah began to see ghostly visions of the past. She watched as patients, lost souls from another era, wandered the corridors in anguish. She felt their pain, their fear, their longing for release. One night, as Sarah and Tom explored the upper floors, they encountered a particularly powerful apparition, a young man who bore a striking resemblance to David. He spoke with a mournful voice, "Help me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she reached out to the ghostly figure. "David, is that you?" The ghostly figure nodded, and Sarah's heart shattered. She knew that her brother was forever trapped in this nightmarish place, just like the others. In that moment, the hospital seemed to come alive around them. The walls groaned, and ghostly hands reached out from the darkness. Sarah and Tom were engulfed in a swirling vortex of sorrow and despair. As they struggled to escape, Tom revealed his own connection to the hospital's past. He had once been a patient here, subjected to the same horrors that had claimed so many lives. He had managed to escape, but he had returned in search of closure to confront the demons of his past. With Tom's guidance, they managed to break free from the clutches of the hospital's malevolent spirits. As they emerged into the moonlit night, Sarah felt a profound sense of loss and grief. She had finally found her brother, but he was forever trapped in the haunted hospital. The lost patient had shown Sarah the enduring impact of loss and the depths of human suffering. She had uncovered the dark secrets of the hospital, but the truth had come at a great cost. As she walked away from that accursed place, she knew that the shadows of the past would haunt her dreams for the rest of her days, a haunting reminder of the price that had been paid for the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The operating theater. The abandoned hospital stood as a chilling relic of a bygone era, its once sterile hallways now cloaked in darkness and decay. Dr. Alan Beck, a historian specializing in medical history, had long been drawn to the sinister tales that surrounded the building. His curiosity had led him here, but he would soon learn that some mysteries were better left undisturbed. Alan was joined by Elise, a medium with the ability to communicate with the spirits of the departed. Together, they entered the forsaken operating rooms, where surgeries had once been performed under dubious circumstances. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, and a palpable sense of dread hung over the place. They stepped into the first operating theater, their flashlights revealing rusted surgical instruments and stained operating tables. Alan shuddered at the sight of the archaic equipment, imagining the horrors that had taken place here. Elise, her eyes distant, began to sway gently. Her voice took on an otherworldly quality as she whispered, "They are still here, Dr. Beck. The spirits of those who suffered and perished on these tables." Alan watched in amazement as Elise seemed to channel the voices of the past. The room filled with the anguished cries and muted moans of patients who had endured surgeries gone horribly wrong. The spirits of the former patients pleaded for justice and release from their torment. One spirit, in particular, caught Elise's attention. It was a young woman who had undergone a procedure that had left her scarred and broken. Her voice trembled as she spoke through Elise. "I was promised a better life, but they took everything from me." Alan felt a profound sense of unease as he listened to the spirits' tales of suffering. He knew that they had to uncover the truth behind the hospital's dark history. As they continued to explore the operating rooms, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber filled with old patient records and journals. The documents hinted at a gruesome pattern of unethical medical practices. Procedures had been performed without consent, and patients had been subjected to experimental surgeries that had left them maimed and broken. Alan's hand shook as he read through the accounts of the patients' ordeals. He realized that the hospital had been a place of unspeakable horror, where the abuse of power had run rampant. Elise, still in her trance-like state, continued to channel the spirits' voices. They begged for closure, for someone to expose the truth of their suffering. It was then that Alan understood the magnitude of their mission. The young woman's spirit, the one who had spoken before, implored, "Please, Dr. Beck, help us find justice. We have been trapped in this nightmarish place for far too long." Alan nodded, his determination solidifying. "We will bring the truth to light. These spirits deserve to find peace." Together, Alan and Elise began to piece together the hospital's dark history, uncovering the names of the doctors responsible for the atrocities committed within its walls. They gathered evidence of the unethical practices and prepared to expose the hospital's gruesome past to the world. But as they delved deeper into their investigation, the hospital itself seemed to resist their efforts. Lights flickered, doors slammed shut, and ghostly figures appeared and disappeared, their mournful cries echoing through the corridors. One night, as they combed through the last of the patient records, the spirits descended upon them with a vengeance. They swirled around Alan and Elise, their spectral forms contorting with rage. The operating theaters came alive with a sinister energy, and the instruments that had once caused so much suffering seemed to move of their own accord. Amid the chaos, the young woman's spirit, the one who had pleaded for justice, appeared before them. Her eyes held a deep sadness as she whispered, "Expose the truth, Dr. Beck. Free us from this eternal torment." With a surge of determination, Alan and Elise faced the malevolent spirits head-on. They vowed to bring the hospital's dark secrets to light, to give the tormented souls the justice and closure they so desperately sought. As they confronted the truth about the hospital's horrific past, they could feel the spirits' anguish and despair slowly dissipate. The malevolent energy began to wane, and the hospital's haunted halls grew calm once more. The operating theater had shown them the depths of human cruelty and the enduring power of the spirits seeking redemption. Alan and Elise left the forsaken hospital with a heavy heart, but they also carried with them a sense of purpose. They would ensure that the truth was exposed, that the horrors of the past were not forgotten, and that the spirits of the departed could finally find the peace they had long been denied. The nurses' quarters. Anna stood before the weathered building, her heart heavy with the weight of history. The old nurses' quarters, once a place of camaraderie and compassion, now lay abandoned and decrepit. She had come here in search of answers, hoping to uncover the untold stories of her ancestor, a nurse who had worked at the hospital many decades ago. As Anna stepped inside the dilapidated building, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. The nurses' quarters had been left virtually untouched, frozen in time like a dusty relic of the past. Abandoned belongings and journals lay scattered about, remnants of the women who had once called this place home. Anna felt a profound sense of connection to the past as she sifted through the journals, each page filled with the daily struggles and triumphs of the nurses. She could almost hear their voices, their laughter, and their whispered confidences. It was as if their spirits lingered here, waiting to share their secrets. As the hours passed, Anna's attention was drawn to a particular journal, its pages brittle with age. It belonged to her ancestor, Margaret. She read with bated breath as Margaret recounted her experiences as a nurse in the hospital, the long hours, the tireless dedication, and the bonds formed with her fellow nurses. But as Anna delved deeper into the journal, she sensed a hidden narrative, a story left untold. Margaret's words hinted at something more, something that had remained buried beneath the surface for decades. It was then that Anna heard a faint, ethereal voice. "You've found my journal," it whispered. Startled, Anna looked around, searching for the source of the voice. Her eyes fell upon a spectral figure, the ghostly apparition of a nurse dressed in a uniform from a bygone era. The ghost's eyes held a sadness that transcended time. "I am Evelyn," the ghostly nurse introduced herself, her voice a wistful sigh. "I never left these quarters, you see. I stayed to keep the memories alive." Anna's heart raced as she realized that she was in the presence of a spirit from the past, a nurse who had once walked these very halls. "Evelyn, I'm Anna. I'm here to learn about my ancestor, Margaret." Evelyn's form wavered as she nodded. "I knew Margaret. She was a remarkable nurse, strong and compassionate. But she carried a burden, a secret that weighed heavily on her heart." Anna leaned in, eager to hear more. What was the secret, Evelyn? Evelyn began to recount the hardships faced by the nurses in the hospital. The long hours, the limited resources, and the unspoken sacrifices they made in the name of their profession. She spoke of love blossoming between two nurses, a love that had to be concealed in a time when such relationships were forbidden. Anna's heart ached as she listened to the tragic love story of Margaret and Sarah, two nurses who had found solace and affection in each other's arms. Their love had flourished in secret, hidden from the prying eyes of a society that refused to accept their feelings. Evelyn's voice quivered as she revealed the climax of their story. They were discovered, Anna, and the consequences were dire. Margaret was forced to make a heartbreaking choice, one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Tears welled in Anna's eyes as she realized the depth of her ancestors' sacrifice. Margaret had chosen to protect Sarah, the woman she loved, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. The pain of that decision had lingered in the nurses' quarters, etching itself into the very walls and floors. But Evelyn had more to share, a revelation that sent a shiver down Anna's spine. There was a scandal, a secret experiment conducted in the hospital. Patients were subjected to inhumane procedures, and the nurses were sworn to silence. Margaret knew of the horrors, and it haunted her. Anna's mind raced as she contemplated the scandal Evelyn had uncovered. The hospital had been a place of darkness, where the abuse of power had reigned unchecked, and the nurses had been complicit in a web of secrets and lies. Evelyn's spectral form seemed to grow dimmer as she concluded her story. Margaret never forgave herself for what happened, Anna. She carried the guilt of those days with her until the end. Anna nodded, her eyes filled with tears. She knew that her ancestor had faced unimaginable hardships and had made difficult choices in the name of love and compassion. Margaret's story, and the stories of the other nurses, had remained hidden for far too long. As Anna left the nurses' quarters, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for Evelyn's guidance. She was determined to uncover the truth, to share the untold stories of the nurses who had labored in the shadows, and to honor the memory of her ancestor, Margaret. The nurses' quarters had shown her the power of memory and the enduring bond between generations. As she walked away from the abandoned building, she knew that she carried with her the responsibility of preserving the stories of those who had come before, ensuring that their sacrifices and secrets were never forgotten. The sealed ward. The abandoned hospital loomed in the moonlight, its halls echoing with the ghosts of forgotten patients and the hushed rumors of a sealed ward. Marcus, an ambitious documentary filmmaker, couldn't resist the allure of the forbidden. He had heard tales of the sealed ward, whispered stories of something unspeakable hidden within its walls. Marcus had convinced Lily, a psychic with a unique ability to sense and communicate with spirits, to join him on this reckless adventure. Together, they stood before the locked door of the mysterious ward, determined to uncover the truth. With trembling hands, Marcus broke the aged seal that had held the door shut for decades. It creaked open, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow their flashlight's feeble beams. The air inside was thick, and a palpable sense of dread hung in the atmosphere. As they stepped into the ward, a shiver ran down Marcus's spine. The place felt like a forgotten tomb, the silence broken only by the faint echoes of their own breathing. The walls were lined with old patient beds, their metal frames rusted with time, and the tattered remnants of restraining straps still hung from some of them. Lily's psychic senses immediately went on high alert. Her eyes widened as she gasped. "There's a darkness here, Marcus, a malevolent energy that hungers for release." Marcus couldn't deny the eerie feeling that crawled up his spine. He had seen many unsettling things in his career, but this was different. It was as if the very air in the ward was charged with a sinister presence. As they ventured deeper into the ward, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Marcus's camera malfunctioned, capturing distorted and haunting images that sent chills down his spine. Lily's psychic abilities seemed to intensify in the ward, and she began to experience disturbing visions. She saw the ghostly figures of patients in torment, their gaunt faces contorted in anguish. They whispered to her, their voices a mournful chorus of suffering. "They died here," Lily murmured, her voice trembling. "They suffered greatly." Marcus watched in horror as Lily seemed to communicate with the spirits trapped within the ward. Their stories spilled forth in disjointed fragments, tales of a mysterious epidemic that had swept through the hospital, claiming the lives of countless patients. As Lily recounted the spirit stories, Marcus's determination to document the ward's secrets began to waver. The pain and suffering that had taken place here were almost too much to bear. But he pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As they explored further, they discovered an old ledger that detailed the ward's history. It spoke of desperate attempts to contain the epidemic, of experimental treatments that had only worsened the patient's suffering, and of the decision to seal the ward off from the rest of the hospital. Marcus's camera captured images of the ledger, and he knew that this was the evidence he needed for his documentary. But as he turned to leave, he heard a chilling whisper in his ear. "Turn back." Startled, he looked around, but there was no one there. Lily, too, had heard the voice and was equally unnerved. Lily's voice quivered as she said, "We need to go back, Marcus. There's something we missed." Reluctantly, Marcus followed Lily deeper into the ward, their flashlights casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The air grew colder, and the malevolent energy seemed to intensify. As they entered a small, dimly lit room, they discovered the shocking truth. The room contained a hidden chamber, and inside, they found a grotesque sight, a preserved specimen jar containing a deformed fetus. Marcus's camera captured the macabre image, and his heart pounded with dread. He knew that this revelation would change everything. It was then that Lily, her eyes filled with sorrow, revealed the final, horrifying piece of the puzzle. The epidemic wasn't what it seemed, Marcus. It was a cover-up. The hospital was experimenting on its own patients, creating abominations in the name of science. The truth hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The sealed ward had housed the grotesque results of the hospital's twisted experiments, and the malevolent energy that lingered within was a testament to the suffering endured by the patients. As Marcus and Lily left the ward, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something beyond their understanding. The hospital's dark history had tainted their souls, and they knew that the secrets of the sealed ward would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The sealed ward had shown them the danger of unchecked curiosity and the haunting nature of history. As they left the hospital behind, they carried with them a chilling reminder that some mysteries were better left buried, and that the pursuit of truth could lead to horrors beyond imagination. The Forgotten Corridors. Henry had always been fascinated by architecture, and the old abandoned hospital in his hometown had always intrigued him. It wasn't just the building's imposing facade or its dilapidated state. It was the long, winding corridors that stretched through its bowels, rumored to change and lead to unexpected places. The locals called it the Maze of Despair. One day, Henry's curiosity got the best of him, and he decided to explore the hospital's forgotten corridors. He had heard stories of people getting lost in the maze, never to be seen again, but he dismissed them as mere urban legends. He was an architect, after all, and he wanted to understand the design of the place that had captivated the imaginations of so many. As Henry entered the labyrinthine corridors, he noticed how the walls seemed to close in on him, and the shadows played tricks on his eyes. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and every step he took echoed through the empty hallways. It was then that he encountered Emma, a local who had heard stories about the corridors since childhood. She had decided to venture into the maze herself, driven by the same curiosity that had consumed Henry. "Be careful," Emma warned as they crossed paths. "These corridors are not what they seem. They change, and they don't always lead back." Henry chuckled nervously. "I'm an architect. I'll figure it out." Together, they pressed on, their footsteps echoing through the labyrinth. But the corridors seemed to defy logic. Doors appeared and disappeared, leading to nowhere or to rooms that seemed to shift and change as they entered. Time itself played tricks on them. Hours seemed to pass in moments, and moments stretched into eternity. It was as if the hospital existed in its own temporal bubble, a place where the laws of reality no longer apply. As they delved deeper into the maze, they discovered cryptic messages scrawled on the walls by former patients. They spoke of the hospital's malevolent design, of being trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The words sent a shiver down Henry's spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Emma's voice trembled as she read one of the messages aloud. "They said it was a place of healing, but it's a place of torment. The walls listen, and the corridors change. We are not alone." Henry and Emma began to lose track of time and direction. The corridors twisted and turned in on themselves, leading them in circles. Panic set in as they realized that they were hopelessly lost, trapped in this nightmarish labyrinth. Desperation gave way to fear as they encountered strange anomalies. They would enter a room only to find themselves back in the corridor they had just left, as if the space itself was folding in on them. They saw glimpses of otherworldly landscapes through windows that shouldn't exist, and they heard voices that whispered unintelligible words in the darkness. As they stumbled through the ever-shifting corridors, they realized that the hospital's design had a sinister purpose. It was a place meant to disorient and confuse, a maze of despair where the boundaries of reality blurred. They were trapped in a living nightmare, and the hospital itself seemed to feed on their fear. Hours turned into days, and the pair grew weak and exhausted. They had lost all sense of time and place, and hope began to fade. But then, in a moment of clarity, Henry remembered something he had read about the hospital's architect. He designed it as an experiment, he whispered to Emma. A twisted experiment to manipulate space and time, to study the disorientation of fear. Emma's eyes widened in realization. We're trapped in his experiment, Henry. We have to find a way out. With newfound determination, they retraced their steps, searching for any clue that would lead them to an exit. They encountered the same cryptic messages on the walls, but now they understood their significance. The hospital's architect had left a trail, a series of hidden markers that would guide them to safety. As they followed the markers, the corridors seemed to relent, leading them toward a flicker of light in the distance. It grew brighter with each step, and finally, they burst out of the labyrinth, gasping for breath and trembling with relief. The forgotten corridors had shown them the disorientation of fear and the mystery of architectural anomalies. They had escaped the hospital's sinister experiment, but they would carry the scars of their ordeal with them forever. As they left the haunted building behind, they knew that some mysteries were best left unsolved, and that the design of the corridors would haunt their nightmares for the rest of their lives. The children's ward. The children's ward of the old hospital had long been abandoned, its once vibrant walls now faded and cracked, the cheerful murals peeling away like the innocence that once thrived within its halls. Grace, a teacher with a passion for history, felt drawn to this eerie place, where the echoes of laughter and the pitter-patter of small feet had long been replaced by silence. One gloomy afternoon, Grace ventured into the forgotten ward. The air felt heavy with nostalgia as she surveyed the room. Abandoned toys lay scattered about, gathering dust like forgotten memories. Faded drawings of smiling suns and playful animals adorned the walls, now mere echoes of the joyful past. But Grace could sense something more in the room, something lingering in the shadows. As she explored further, she encountered the ghost children, a group of child spirits who still lingered in the ward, their presence both haunting and bittersweet. The ghost children appeared as translucent figures, their faces forever frozen in expressions of innocence and wonder. They watched Grace with curious eyes, and she could feel their silent yearning to share their stories. With a soft smile, Grace began to interact with the ghost children, sitting down among the abandoned toys as if she were one of them. They responded with hesitant gestures and whispers, slowly revealing their tales of the past. One spirit, a young girl named Emily, told Grace of the games they used to play in the ward, their laughter echoing through the corridors. Another, a boy named Samuel, shared stories of the nurses who had cared for them, their comforting presence a beacon of hope in the sterile hospital environment. But as Grace listened to their stories, she also uncovered the harsh realities the children had faced. Many had been afflicted by illnesses that robbed them of their youth and vitality. Their laughter had often been tinged with pain, their innocent eyes hiding the weight of their suffering. Grace felt a deep sympathy for the ghost children. Their lost childhoods a tragic testament to the cruelties of fate. She could sense their yearning for closure, for a chance to find peace and move on. As she continued to interact with the spirits, Grace discovered a particularly heart-wrenching story. It was that of Anna, a young girl who had spent her final days in the children's ward, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. Anna's story touched Grace's heart deeply, and she made it her mission to help this lost spirit find the peace she so desperately needed. With gentle words and a reassuring touch, Grace guided Anna toward a sense of acceptance. She helped the young spirit confront the pain and sorrow that had kept her tethered to the ward. Slowly, Anna's ethereal form began to glow with a soft, comforting light, and a peaceful smile graced her lips. The other ghost children watched in awe as Anna's spirit ascended, her form dissipating like morning mist. It was a poignant moment, a bittersweet farewell to the past. Grace continued to visit the children's ward, spending time with the remaining ghost children. She discovered the forgotten joys and sorrows of the ward, a place where innocence had once thrived amid the harsh realities of illness and uncertainty. The children's ward had shown Grace the innocence of youth and the tragedy of lost childhoods. As she left the room, she carried with her a profound appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit, and a deep sense of compassion for those whose childhoods had been stolen by the cruelties of fate. The memories of the ghost children would forever linger in her heart, a reminder of the enduring power of childhood wonder, even in the face of darkness. The morgue's secret. The hospital's morgue, a place of death and dark secrets, lay hidden beneath the cold and unforgiving floors. David, an investigative journalist, had been researching a series of unexplained disappearances that were haunting the town, and the trail had led him to this chilling place. The morgue's atmosphere was as cold as the embrace of death itself. Sterile steel tables, once used to examine lifeless bodies, now sat empty and foreboding. A faint, eerie hum echoed through the room, sending a shiver down David's spine. David's curiosity had drawn him to this grim place, but he couldn't ignore the ominous stories that had circulated about it. The disappearances that plagued the town seemed to be linked to the morgue in some way, and David was determined to uncover the truth. With a flashlight in hand, he ventured deeper into the morgue, his footsteps echoing in the dimly lit corridor. The air grew colder with each step, and the oppressive silence seemed to press down on him like a heavy weight. As David began his investigation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The room held secrets, and it seemed as though the very walls themselves were hiding something from him. He knew he wasn't alone. That's when he saw him, the keeper, a mysterious figure cloaked in darkness. The keeper emerged from the shadows, his face hidden beneath a hood. His presence was as chilling as the morgue itself, and his voice was a low, haunting whisper. "You tread on dangerous ground, journalist," the keeper warned. "The morgue's secrets are not meant for the living." David stood his ground, determined to face the enigmatic guardian of this macabre place. "I need to know the truth, no matter the cost." The keeper regarded him with empty, soulless eyes. "Very well. If you seek the truth, then follow me." With that, the keeper led David deeper into the morgue, through hidden passages and forgotten chambers. The air grew heavier, and the walls seemed to close in around them, as though the very building itself were alive and conspiring against them. They arrived at a hidden chamber, its walls adorned with gruesome evidence of the morgue's dark past. Photographs of missing persons, medical records, and bloodstained gurneys told a horrifying tale of experimentation and cruelty. David's voice quivered as he spoke, his heart pounding with dread. What happened here? What were they trying to hide? The keeper's answer sent shivers down David's spine. The hospital's doctors were conducting experiments on the living and the dead, seeking to unlock the secrets of life and death. They used the morgue as their laboratory, and the missing souls were their unwitting subjects. As David processed the horrifying truth, he noticed a series of photographs on the wall. They depicted a group of patients, their faces twisted in agony. Among them was a familiar face, a woman who had disappeared years ago, a loved one he had been searching for. "You have your answers, journalist," the keeper intoned. "But there is a price to pay for this knowledge." Suddenly, the room grew colder, and David felt a force pulling at him, as though the very ground beneath him were trying to swallow him whole. He fought against it, struggling to escape the morgue's grasp. With one final effort, he broke free, gasping for air as he stumbled out of the chamber and into the morgue's main room. The keeper had vanished, leaving David with a chilling revelation and a heavy heart. The morgue's secret had been unveiled, but at a great cost. David had learned the horrifying truth of the hospital's dark past, but he had also uncovered the sinister power that guarded its secrets. As he left the morgue behind, he knew that some mysteries were better left buried, and that the price of knowledge could be a fate worse than death. The midnight shift. The hospital at night was a place where the boundaries between reality and nightmare seemed to blur. It was during these eerie hours that Nora, a security guard working the night shift, would come to realize that darkness held secrets far more sinister than she could ever imagine. Nora's job was simple: to patrol the empty corridors, ensuring that the hospital remained secure. But as the nights passed, she began to notice strange occurrences that defied explanation. Lights flickered in unoccupied rooms. Distant footsteps echoed through deserted hallways, and chilling whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. At first, Nora dismissed these phenomena as mere products of her overactive imagination. But as the weeks went by, she couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that she was not alone in the hospital. One night, as she made her rounds, she caught a glimpse of shadowy figures moving through the dimly lit corridors. They were elusive and seemed to disappear as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind an eerie sense of dread. Determined to uncover the truth behind these mysterious apparitions, Nora decided to follow the shadowy figures on her next shift. As she pursued them deeper into the hospital's labyrinthine passages, the once familiar environment began to change. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive presence. Nora's heart raced as she found herself in a nightmarish reality. The hospital that had once been her workplace had transformed into a twisted, otherworldly realm. The walls were now adorned with grotesque paintings that seemed to writhe and contort, and the floor beneath her feet felt like shifting sands. The shadowy figures led her deeper into this nightmarish realm, their movements fluid and otherworldly. Nora's sense of isolation and vulnerability intensified with each step, and the line between reality and the supernatural grew increasingly blurred. As she followed them through a series of surreal and macabre scenes, Nora began to understand that these shadowy figures were not merely apparitions. They were something more malevolent, something ancient and sinister. Finally, Nora reached the heart of this nightmarish realm, a chamber filled with flickering candles and a haunting, ghostly presence. The shadowy figures converged, their forms coalescing into a single, towering entity. It regarded her with empty, soulless eyes, and its voice echoed in her mind. "We are the watchers of the night, the guardians of the threshold," it intoned. "You have trespassed into our domain, and now you must bear witness." With a chilling sense of dread, Nora watched as the entity began to reveal the secrets of the hospital's dark history. She saw the suffering of countless souls, trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment and despair. The hospital had become a nexus of pain and anguish, a place where the lost and forgotten lingered in eternal agony. As the entity's revelations continued, Nora's mind teetered on the edge of madness. She realized that the hospital's night shift was not a simple job. It was a descent into a nightmarish world where reality itself unraveled. Desperate to escape the horrors that surrounded her, Nora pleaded for release. The entity regarded her with a cold, empty stare, and with a gesture, it cast her out of its nightmarish domain. Nora awoke in the dimly lit hospital corridor, her heart pounding and her body drenched in cold sweat. It was as though she had emerged from a fever dream, but the memory of the entity's revelations lingered in her mind like a haunting echo. From that night on, Nora could never look at the hospital the same way again. The boundaries between reality and nightmare had blurred, and the fear of isolation had left its mark on her psyche. The midnight shift had revealed a truth far more chilling than she could have ever imagined, a truth that would haunt her for the rest of her life.